Hi, and thank you for watching today's video. What if addiction is the symptom and not actually the problem, but a symptom of the problem? That's what I'm talking about in today's video. So let's think a little bit about addictions and addictive behavior. So a lot of times when people think about addictions, they go straight to alcohol and drugs, usually as when people think about it. Addictive behaviors can show up in several places, and it's not just alcohol and drugs. It can be food, it can be sex, it can be gambling, it can be certain types of foods. It can be certain types of alcohol. It can be certain types of drugs. It can be smoking. It can be whether it's cigarettes or marijuana. It can be, um, let's see, shopping. Did I say that? Gambling, biting your nails, um, codependency. Like there can be, oh, even drama. There can be so many addictions, addictive behaviors that show up, I believe, as symptoms. I believe they show up to highlight something that's brewing underneath. Imagine the iceberg scenario or the image of the iceberg. What you see on the top is only just a fraction of what's really going on underneath. In my work, my signature program is called Unboxing Your Authentic Self. And I came to that through my own journey. And then I started thinking about the system of how I got to the other side of extensive trauma, abuse, loss, complex PTSD. How did I get to the other side of those things? And I started realizing that there were four really big moments, key points. I call them the four magical pathways to peace and purpose. It was number one, the mind body connection. Number two, mindfulness. Number three, mindset. And number four, manifest. And how I used those things, even though I wasn't consciously doing it at the time, it was over time. I looked back and could see the journey. So I realized that these were really just instrumental in helping me heal. Now, the way that I work with them and the way that I see them is fairly different than a lot of people. First, I look at things from a holistic healing perspective, mind, body, spirit. So, how do these things connect to the topic for today, which is around addiction and addiction or addictive behaviors? So, it begins when I tell you a little bit about my analogy of a splinter. And this is how it goes. Imagine you are in your mother's womb, because that's how we all started out. Imagine you've got that going on, and imagine that your mother is going through a considerable amount of things during her pregnancy. Then imagine that you go through your birth, and the birth experience, your birth experience could have many, many facets. It could have been an easy birth. It could have been a hard birth. It could have been long. You could have had or come into the world through natural childbirth. You could have come into the world through a vaginal delivery with anesthesia. You could have come into the world from a C-section. There could have been a lot of chaos. So all of this starts to become part of your story, right? Then you come into the world and you start to experience life in the conditions that you've been born into. Okay, now that gets us to the splinter. So let's think for a minute about a splinter. Let's say you get one in your finger. Often you don't even know it's there, right? You get a splinter and it's just there and you don't even notice it. So imagine that an unhealed emotion that you picked up through the time that you were in utero, through your birth story, to being birthed into the world, da 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 da. Okay. Imagine that you have some emotional wounds that happen during that period of time, and they're like a splinter. Okay. So again, they're there, they're just kind of dormant, maybe not really doing much. So what happens with a splinter? Well, over time, a splinter might start to sort of itch, right? It might just like be a little bit irritating, not bad, but just a little bit of an itch. A little bit like the emotions, just a little bit of an itch. And then with the splinter, it might start to get sore to the touch, might get a little bit red, might get a little bit sore to the touch. So imagine over here with the emotions that maybe all of a sudden you're a little bit angry, you're a little bit irritated, you're a little bit frustrated, you're a little bit agitated. Maybe you have a little bit of things going on where you're a little bit triggered. Okay, go back to the splinter. Now imagine that it's gone from being a little bit sore, a little bit irritated, to really hurting. Like it's really just red and right? It's really starting to get your attention. Go back to the emotions. Imagine that things start to become a little bit unbearable, and maybe you decide to slip into a coping skill, whether that be any of the things that I mentioned before. It might even be sleep. It might even be TV. It might even be a video game, whatever. Just consider putting the analogies together. Okay, back to the splinter. Think about this thing really starts to hurt, right? And maybe it requires some medical intervention. And then maybe it begins to scream to the point that you need surgery. Maybe even beyond that, it becomes so bad, maybe you lose your finger. Back over here to the analogy of the emotions. So imagine that somebody started out with these sort of coping skills to deal with things, because over time, it wasn't just one splinter. Over time, it wasn't just one emotional wound. These things built up and built up and built up and built up. So maybe that drink that you had became many drinks. Maybe that, the nail situation became no nails at all. Maybe whatever, you get the point. And then maybe it's something that also has a legal repercussion to it. And maybe it lands you in jail, or maybe it lands you in rehab, or maybe it causes your health to fail. So this is what I want you to think about when we talk about addiction, when we talk about the iceberg. And now I've given you a lot of analogies to think about the iceberg, above the water, all the big thing going on underneath, the splinter, how it grows and becomes more and more painful. Think about all of this when it comes to emotion. I love a lot of people in my life who have been challenged with addiction. Drugs, alcohol primarily. There's been gambling. And these are people who have, um, with the behaviors, have really kind of tanked their life in a lot of ways. There are other addictions that have sort of flown under the radar. Me, for example, I mentioned nail biting. That has been a challenge throughout my life in a very addictive sort of way. Um, I was also a heavy smoker for a time. I had challenges, well, 2.5 packs a day of Marlboro Reds. I would say that's significant. We're coming up on my, gosh, 22-year quit anniversary this month. Food. So sometimes some of the addictive behaviors that you have sort of fly under the radar. And then you've got people, oh, the smoking one, by the way, I was diagnosed with emphysema at 38 years old, so didn't really fly under the radar. But with the other addictions, I have someone who I love very much who uh, just about OD'd in the last couple of days. Um, I have sat with people when they were going through DTs. That's a type of tremor that you go through when you're detoxing off of alcohol. I have seen some pretty horrible things that people go through. And people focus on the addiction like it's the problem. The addiction is just the top of the iceberg. It is the symptom for what is going on underneath. This person has been holding something, has been carrying something throughout their life that began as an unhealed emotion, and then it began to blossom. And how I look at this in my work when it comes to the mind-body connection is we look at what is the addiction, what is the addictive behavior, because every one of them have a different clue as to what the unhealed emotion is and when the unhealed emotion likely happened. And typically it's from the time you were in utero to about 7 years old. There were things that happened to sort of set up the environment for the addiction to surface. Now, based on multiple things, including personality, you might have certain, multiple people in the same circumstances, but maybe they don't all develop an addiction. Well, that again has to do with a lot of other factors for the person. So how you work with each person is you recognize that they have been carrying around an iceberg underneath that they likely aren't even aware of because it's things that go on in the subconscious mind. Sometimes they're aware of it, but sometimes they're not. A lot of times they're not. And that's part of where my work comes in is we help you, one, determine what is the root. Not all cases. In some cases, we're working with the subconscious. We don't ever really know what the root is. But based on the behaviors that you have, based on the symptoms that you have, whether it's a physical symptom, emotional symptom, an addiction, broken bones, surgeries, diagnoses, procedures, different things that you've experienced are all clues to help us get to the other side of what's keeping you in this cycle. Now, it's really challenging if you're not the one with the addiction or the addictive behavior and you love them. That brings another set of challenges. You may have your own type of addictions that have to do with that person. That becomes really challenging. In a lot of the recovery type things that happen out there in the mainstream world, they focus on the 12 steps, which was a great program. Some people go through that program and it works really well. The challenge I have with it is it continues to reinforce I am a whatever. And you continue to create that subconscious pattern that that's what you are. The work that we do focuses on what's under the iceberg and clearing out that iceberg so that the addiction lets go of you. It's less at that point really about the things that you're doing to get to the other side of it, although that's super important, and more about what we can release out of your body. And releasing comes in a lot of different forms. I'm feeling very sad today, and addiction is on my mind. And that was the point of today's video, is to see how you're doing. Are you navigating some addictive behavior symptoms that are the top of the iceberg when there's a lot more brewing underneath? Or are you someone who's dealing with someone who's going through those things? Both are challenging. You're worthy. You matter. And when the world seems so dark for you, remember that you're worthy. You're worthy of a good life. You're worthy of a better life. And you're worthy of living a life where you feel at peace on the inside. I think that's what I had to say today. Thanks so much for watching. If you or someone you know is experiencing this, either, the addiction, the addictive behaviors, or loving and caring for someone that is, I am a coach. I'm not a counselor, although I have a master's in counseling. I'm not a rehab. I'm not a detox. I'm not any of those things. I work with holistic healing, about getting you to the other side of these things without doing it the way everyone else does. If you feel called, make a comment or reach out and schedule a consultation with me, and let's see what we can do. I also just created a free roadmap called Awaken Your Purpose, and it's a roadmap for personal and spiritual growth. I'll link both the consultation information and that in the comments. And if I can support you on your journey, please let me know. Know that you are a valuable human in this world. And there are people who love you. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.